I must say that I'm always so happy, truly happy to be with Soren, who has been such a pioneer in this field. As he knows, I believe this is the most important conversation we can be having, and Soren has been leading it for a very, very long time. And he asked me to start with my own personal journey, some of which you may know and some of which you may not know, because my journey in Wisdom 2.0 started when I was very little in Athens, Greece, when I was like, my first memory is being 3 or 4 years old and being absolutely sure that there had to be something else. And my something else at the time was the Virgin Mary. I felt this very personal connection to the Virgin Mary, not in any dogmatic sense. My mother was a very, very free spirit who was doing yoga and had us initiated by Maharishi when I was 13. So she was not your typical Greek Orthodox mother. In fact, she was constantly embarrassing me because she would arrive to pick me up at my conventional little girls' school in Athens wearing kaftans and no shoes. And it was just a total inner connection with her. So whenever I was sad or challenged, I would pray to the Virgin Mary. And she was like another mother for me, and I felt her very present. And then the next big point in my life was when I was 17, and I decided to go to India and study comparative religion at Shantiniketan University outside Calcutta. It was founded by Rabindranath Tagore, and I wore saris and learned that if you're really, really hot, you have to drink really, really hot tea, because somehow there's a ventilation that happens. Don't ask me to explain it, but it worked. And got comfortable with death because it was all around you, and living life in the presence of death had this huge impact on me. And then I wrote my first book when I was 23, and I got caught up in the maelstrom of the first book being very successful, which was incredibly unexpected because I'd come from a family with no money and had always struggled with money, and suddenly I had all of the things I thought would take me a lifetime to achieve, and I felt very miserable, and I had my midlife crisis at 24. Literally, I remember being in a hotel in Detroit in the middle of a book tour, asking the Peggy Lee question, is that all there is? And then I basically decided to write a book which nobody wanted to read, called After Reason, which was my first kind of written work about the recognition that there is something else in life beyond reason. And I approached it from the political angle and the more philosophical angle. I don't recommend it. It's incredibly dense and unreadable. It was rejected by 36 publishers before finally somebody published it. But the process of all these rejections was also incredibly edifying, spiritually edifying, because it taught me about resilience, and it taught me about staying the course if you believe in something, and then amazing things happen that you don't expect. And for me, the amazing thing that happened was walking into a Barclays bank, believe it or not, in St. James's Street in London when I had run out of money and was wondering if I should change professions, and asking the bank manager for a loan, and the bank manager giving it to me. And it made me feel, like you feel in a fairy tale when the hero or the heroine is lost in a dark forest, and then these helpful animals come out to help them find their way out. Well, ever since that moment, I have this deep conviction that there are helpful animals disguised as human beings all around us, disguised as bank managers or whatever in your life. And if you look back at your own life, you are going to remember those moments. So ever since, really, I've been leading my life, even the darkest moments, fully convinced that Rumi was right when he said, live your life as though everything is rigged in your favor. It's a very profound way to lead your life, because so many people lead their lives as though they're perpetually victimized and everything is against them. So one more point on this journey came in 1994 when I decided to write another book that had a spiritual foundation after I had written biographies of Picasso and Maria Callas, etc. And that book was called The Fourth Instinct. And it was based on my conviction that beyond our first three instincts, the ones that most psychologists and biologists talk about, which are survival, sex, and power, they give them different names, but it comes down to those three. There is that fourth instinct, which is the instinct that drives us to transcendence, meaning, art, altruism, all the things that don't make sense in terms of the first three instincts, and yet often dominate our lives. And that book was also a big flop. As you've known, there's a pattern here, right? Whenever I would go to write about these things that I felt were very, very important to me, and I thought incredibly important to the world, and I thought the world would be so eager to hear what I had to say on the subject, I was like amazed to discover that the world didn't care. And so life went on, and I wrote political books, and I got married, and I had children, and I got divorced, and I launched the Huffington Post. And in 2005. And in 2007, there was the other kind of dramatic moment when I fainted from exhaustion and hit my head on my desk and broke my cheekbone and got 4 stitches on my right eye. And that was really the moment of no return. That was the moment when that journey for me really intensified, and the recognition that I had to live my life in a different way became sort of very, very central. Because, you know, we all have these glimpses, we integrate them in our lives, then life takes over, and then there comes this moment when this has become really central in my life. And from 2007 to 2013, that has also become a big part of the Huffington Post editorial initiative, because I now had a platform that could help me take this message out to reach a world which was in a very different place. Because there is a new listening in the world right now, and everybody here who's been involved in this journey in whatever way for a long time knows that there is something else happening right now. And Jonas Salk, whom I got to know when I was writing my biography of Picasso, he invented the vaccine against polio. He was married to Françoise Gillot, who was one of Picasso's mistresses. And before he died, I remember having this conversation with him in La Jolla, and he said to me, we're moving from Epoch A to Epoch B. Epoch A was based on survival and competition. Epoch B is going to be based on collaboration and meaning. And we see that happening, and that's why now we have an opportunity to take all this conversation here and really accelerate the impact it's going to have on the way we lead our lives and change the world. And the business entry point that is the focus of this conference is incredibly important. It's one of many entry points. There are many, many doors to this conversation and this way of living. But business is incredibly important because there's so much data attached that it's easier to take this conversation away from California New Age flaky to serious, data-driven, scientifically based, this is for real. And everything has come together for me this year in the idea of the third metric. I was looking for a way to bring this conversation to as many people as possible. And I came up with the idea of redefining success. Because if you think of it, so much of our attention, our energy, our time is spent on succeeding. And we define success in terms of money and power, in terms of 2 metrics. which is like a two-legged stool. Sooner or later you fall off. And the third metric consists of well-being, wisdom, the ability to connect with our own wisdom, wonder, the ability to wonder at the world, to be connected with the magic of the world, and giving. These are the four elements of the third metric. And when we look at well-being and wisdom, these are absolutely critical also to a healthy bottom line. I'm so glad you had Mark Bertorini here, because I think he, through his own journey, has had and is going to have an even bigger, incredible impact on business in general, because this has now gone mainstream. 24% of corporate America has introduced some form of mindfulness program in their corporations. And as Mark told you, it has a direct impact on the bottom line. But it also philosophically means that while the Greek philosophers would always ask three questions: how do we govern the city? What do I need to know? And what is a good life? We stopped asking the third question sometime after Spinoza, when Western philosophy became about deconstruction and semantics and literally playing on the surface of philosophy rather than the depth of it. So as a result, people were left to their own devices, and they defined success in these incredibly superficial terms. What is so interesting is that if you go to any memorial or funeral service, they actually talk about the third metric. Have you ever heard any eulogy going on about how wonderful it was that Jane or Bob had become an SVP? It was all about how generous they were, or how wise they were, or how giving they were. All the things that we value after our death, it's time that we started valuing them while we're alive. And ironically, the idea that there's some kind of trade-off between our well-being and wisdom and giving and having a successful company has been disproven again and again and again. For me, one of the most interesting ways to disprove it was reading an op-ed by Erin Callan, who was the CFO of Lehman Brothers just before it went bankrupt. And she wrote recently in the New York Times how she had sacrificed her entire life to her job at Lehman Brothers. She had destroyed her marriage, her relationships, everything. And as I was reading that, I thought to myself, the one thing you don't mention, Erin, is that also Lehman Brothers was destroyed. It's not as if, hey, I destroyed my life, but look, I built this fantastic company which doesn't exist anymore. The truth of the matter is that we really no longer have the luxury to ignore our well-being, our wisdom, our ability to make good decisions, because the world is moving so fast that we can no longer be in maintenance mode. We have to be constantly innovating, constantly creating, and we can't do that from the surface. We can't do that from burnout. And right now, the American workplace is largely run on burnout, sleep deprivation, and exhaustion. And men have designed it. So women will have to lead the way of changing it with the help of a few good men, I'm sure all of whom are here in this room today. Because I completely agree with Christine about the Shakti, about the fact that when we honor the feminine, the Shakti, the feminine, will take care of everything else. It's really another way of saying the kingdom of God is within. And when you find the kingdom of God, all else shall be added unto you. It's a bit of a paradox, because we're really saying, hey, if you do all these things, if you take care of yourself, whatever that means, meditate, pray, contemplate. Meditation has become the catchword, but the Christian tradition, the Judaic tradition are full of equivalents to meditation. So whatever word works for you, let's not get lost in semantics. Whatever practice works for you, it basically means how can we do something every day that keeps us connected with ourselves. Because we all know two things. We all know that we have a place in us of wisdom, strength, harmony, and peace. We all have felt that. And we all know that most of the time we don't live from that place. So the question is, how can we live from that place more and more? And ironically, even though technology is a big problem here, technology makes it easier for us to be disconnected from that place, there are also ways we can use technology to reconnect us. At HuffPost, we launched an app. There is an app for that, yes, called GPS for the Soul, which you can download from free. It was very important to me that it would be free from the App Store. And it gives you a proxy for stress, your heart rate variability. And then you launch a guide, whatever it is that helps you course correct. And it's under a minute. Because as Mark Williams, the professor of clinical psychology at Oxford, has demonstrated, it takes seconds for you to get back in that place. And he has this great passage in his book on mindfulness about gazelles. Gazelles run like crazy when there is a danger, but when the leopard or the lion has gone, they graze. And we have lost the capacity to graze. We are like in perpetual fight or flight mode, because unlike animals, we are constantly connected to the past and the future. And so we need to learn, again, as the Bible says, let the dead bury the dead. The evil of today is enough. And also not to live in constant negative fantasy about the future. Montaigne, I've had many terrible things in my life, he wrote, but most of them never happened. So that's where that whole emphasis on being in the present comes from. So using technology to help us disconnect from technology and reconnect with ourselves is one of the paradoxes that we're seeing all around us now. And that's why the Do Not Disturb feature that Apple put out was one of the most successful features they put out. You would have thought we did not need a feature. But whatever it is that can help us, let's go for it. Because this is an amazing moment when we're literally living through a split-screen world. And depending on what part of the screen you are looking at, you have two very different impressions about the world. On one screen is a completely unmanageable, chaotic world with people burnt out, leaders disconnected from themselves. Just take a look any day at Washington, D.C. And on the other part of the screen, you have people who are reconnecting with themselves. You have business leaders who are bringing that into the way they run their companies. At the Huffington Post, for example, we've instituted certain clear guidelines. No need to respond to emails after work or during the weekend. If there is something urgent, we'll find you. Nap rooms in the newsroom. When I first instituted nap rooms, people were like, really, who is going to be seen walking into a nap room in the middle of the afternoon? Well, now they're perpetually booked. In fact, the other day I was walking by one of them and I saw two people coming out of it. And I thought to myself, whatever it takes to disconnect and distract. Just don't tell HR. Weekly yoga classes, meditation classes, breathing exercises. Essential. Breathing is just such an obvious but neglected tool right there available to us. And business leaders, whether it's Jeff Weiner talking about compassion, as Soren recently wrote, or Mark Bertorini, or John Mackey at at Whole Foods, or the CEO of Salesforce at TechCrunch talking about how he's been meditating for 2 decades, or when I was at Davos last January, having Matthieu Ricard in his Buddhist robes walking around talking about meditation. These are all very new. This whole conversation has now gone into the boardrooms and into the HR offices in major corporations. And our job in the media is to help accelerate it. And that's what makes me most excited. I feel as though I built the Huffington Post for this reason, that now it's actually available with 75 million UVs in 8 countries, and soon in another 5. Our editor-in-chief from Brazil is here. We're launching in Brazil in December, in Germany in October, then India, South Korea. We're already in Spain, France, Italy, UK, Canada. This is a global conversation. And what I love is that every country we are in has something to bring to the conversation. We launched in Japan recently. And they have forgotten their own values. They have forgotten what they have. You know, these amazing Zen teachings, which ironically, HuffPost Japan is now reintroducing into Japan. You go to Italy, and of course you have the slow food movement. You have the slow living movement. And again, covering all that in a relentless way. That's what it's going to take. Because so often we suffer from ADD, attention deficit disorder, and I want us to cover what at HuffPost we're calling these third metric issues in a completely obsessive compulsive way. And what I really want to invite you all here is to just cross-post whatever you are doing on your own blog, somewhere else. This is not about exclusivity. It doesn't matter to us at all. We just want to be an additional platform. Everybody here is extremely busy. You don't have to write anything new or say anything new. Whatever you're already writing or saying, just send it to us as well. And I'm going to make this super easy for you. I'm going to give you my email address so you can bypass the Huffington Post growing bureaucracy. And that is Arianna, with 1 R and 2 N's, at huffingtonpost.com. And also I'm going to introduce you to our editor, Tom, would you stand? Tom Dan, who is here. Tom, what is your email address? Tom.Dan at huffingtonpost.com. So,
How do you spell Dan?
D-A-N. 1 N, yes. So you'll definitely be able to reach one or the other of us. We are very much into customer service. And basically, the amazing thing is that you never know then who is going to read something that you write or say or a picture you send, and who is going to be touched and who is going to find this as his or her entry point into that Wisdom 2.0 journey. And just one example that I love that recently happened, there was a mom blogger who blogged on her own little blog about, the title of the blog was The Day I Stopped Saying Hurry Up to My Daughter. And then she cross-posted on the Huffington Post. She had gotten a few hundred page views on her blog. She now has 7 million people who have read it on the Huffington Post. We had it translated in every language. It's got millions of likes, retweets, etc. And it is just such a powerful, simple message. I mean, I was in tears as I was reading it, because it was her recognition that from the moment she woke up to the moment she went to bed, she kept telling her daughter, hurry up and get dressed, hurry up and go to school, hurry up and get ready for bed, hurry up and go to sleep. And then there was this moment when they were somewhere on the coast in the summer, and she had bought her this ice cream that she loved, and her little girl was sitting down eating the ice cream, and she looked at her plaintively, and she said, Mommy, do I have to hurry up? And it's like so moving, because we all do that to ourselves. We don't just do it to our children, we do it to ourselves. We all have that child in us, and we are constantly hurrying her up through whatever it is that we are doing, and kind of missing life. You know, the Greek word amartia means sin, but it actually means, in literal translation, missing the mark. And living life that way is really missing the mark. Living life in this fight or flight mechanism is missing the mark. And let me just end by saying that business as an entry point is incredibly important. It is a little paradoxical, as I said, because we're really saying if you do all these things, you are going to be better at business. But you're also going to realize that your job doesn't define you. And that's really the ultimate revelation. Yes, you'll be better at your job, but it's also very important to realize and remember every day that we are not our jobs. Whatever it is that you're doing, if the Wisdom 2.0 conference were taken away from Soren, or the Huffington Post was taken away from me, that's not who we are. And when we define ourselves by our jobs, and the temptation is the more glorious and successful our jobs are, the more tempted we are to define ourselves by them, then we're really missing the mark. So thank you so much. Thank you for being part of this important journey.
So we're going to have time for a few questions. Yeah. So Arianna has graciously offered to stay for a little bit and answer some questions from the audience. So I'm just here to help do that. So there's two mics.
While you're actually thinking of questions, I want to introduce you to my sister, Agapi Stassinopoulos. I don't know where she is. Somewhere there. Over there, who is... who has...
She was about to ask a question, I think.
Who has also written a book about our journey and about our mother, who was very much... who always kind of lived what I'm saying now. And what was interesting was that when she died in 2000, I suddenly felt that I actually now had to incorporate a lot of the things that she lived by, that while she was alive... You know, that happens in relationships. Sometimes she was carrying that part, you know, that timeless rhythm of living life, that ability to always connect with people, not having impersonal relationships, etc.
Now, was that true for you before she passed away, or it became much more?
It became much more important. I mean, I remember the last time she was angry with me before she died was because she saw me opening my mail and talking to my children at the same time. And she said to me, I abhor multitasking. And right now, again, there is neuroscientific evidence that says that there is no such thing as multitasking. It's actually task switching.
Toggle back and forth.
And that it actually is one of the most stressful things we can do to ourselves.
So I think we have a question. Should we start here? A question over here.
Hi, thank you so much for providing such an amazing platform that's been so inspirational and presenting a door for people to walk through. I just wanted to, one, say thank you for that, and then share with you that I work in an environment where sometimes I feel like I'm the lone person trying to share and affect change in a way that I can see where there are so many people who are wounded, there are so many people who are sort of struggling and bringing things to the workplace that prevent us from being fully authentic. And my boss is a former Marine, and he is an amazing man. He has an incredible heart. And he responded at some point to a post that you did, and you responded back to him with such kindness, and he called me in his office because he knew sort of the things I talk about and whatever, and he was just very thoughtful and quiet and humbled and said, look at this. And I just want you to know from a direct recent within the last couple of weeks example of what you do every day and the authenticity that you bring to it has incredible ripple effects at very, very minor levels as well as, you know, global level. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And please tell us, you know, your name and what you do.
Oh, we're not supposed to here.
Oh, you're not?
No.
Really? Why?
I'm Susan Davis. I run an international humanitarian development organization, BRAC, USA. And I am more than my job. Right. This was beautiful, and thank you. I was wondering if you could share how you're managing the tension personally and with the HuffPost's growth with these issues of, elaborate a little more on the boundaries, because as you're succeeding and as the opportunities are growing and as you have a big vision and ambition, and offered everybody your email, how do you deal with the flood? Yesterday we heard Mark from Aetna say, he doesn't answer the email, and he's let that go. So tell us about the struggle, because every day we wake up and have choices.
That is a very important question, and I feel really that it's in the constant decisions that I make every day. It's not like a universal, unified field theory that I have come up with. First of all, it's recognizing that you have to say no to a lot of things you wish you could do. Saying no to things you don't want to do becomes easier once you realize that you may upset people, but you don't want to do that. What is harder is when there are many things that I really, really want to do, and then I have now learned to prioritize my sleep, for example. There is something in my life that is not negotiable. It doesn't mean it's not negotiable 7 days a week, but it's not negotiable a lot of the time. There are always going to be change, if you're flying overnight and whatever. But I try to get 7 to 8 hours sleep. It dramatically transforms the way I feel, the way I act, the decisions I make, the joy I bring into my life, the empathy, everything. I stress that because it is so trivial that I can almost hear some people saying, oh my God, there she goes again about sleep. But it has so changed my life, as going from somebody who slept for 4 hours a day to going to somebody who sleeps 7, and it has made me much more effective. If I look, as Bill Clinton said, he said that if he looks back, the worst decisions of his life he made when he was sleep deprived and exhausted. He did not specify which decisions. But I know, and I know that also we're not as likely to listen to the whisperings, to see things that are not as obvious, all the things that actually make you a more effective leader. So that for me is the number one thing. And my meditation, I do practice every day. And again, I learned that I have to do it before I start my day. And walking or doing yoga or doing some integrating movement in my life. These are sort of my 3 very simple keys. And each one of us has to find their keys. But prioritizing nurturing ourselves is really not a luxury anymore. It's like an essential thing if we're going to be effective, and if we're not going to miss the mark in terms of our life's journey too.
That's beautiful. And the company then?
And that's all related because what I do at the company is really very much my life. HuffPost is like, I call it my 3rd child. I have 2 daughters and I have HuffPost, and HuffPost is much more demanding at the moment because my daughters are 22 and 24. So again, the same thing applies for me. It's learning to hire great leaders. I have a great leadership team. And it's kind of interesting. I now have the best leadership team I've ever had. And I think it's a function of making wiser decisions. I was in Orlando yesterday, and I was talking to Donna Shalala, who was in the Clinton administration, is now the president of the University of Miami, and she said to me, I used to tell my staff, we are paid for our judgment, not our stamina. Because, there are people who think you have to put in the long hours. I mean, Mayor Bloomberg saying the other day that you have to work really hard, not go to the bathroom. And I saw him the other day, and I said, "Really, Mike?" I said, "I don't. That's not how you got where you are. So let's not give let's not give this false. Let's not keep perpetuating this false idea."
And so, as you've tried to focus more on taking care of yourself, you've found that Huffington Post can grow and expand even as you take that time for yourself. Because usually people think that if you take any time away from work, you're missing out.
No, because I think I kind of can, often in my meditations, I can immediately focus on what some problem areas are, even before they have fully manifested themselves, and then go right there and deal with them. If you're just constantly operating from your inbox, you may miss things that are happening that have not yet hit your inbox. It's like, for me, leadership ultimately is about seeing the icebergs before they hit the Titanic. And if you read the history of the financial meltdown in this country, from the point of view of the lack of wisdom 2.0 or even wisdom 1.0, you see that you wonder, where were the CEOs and CFOs, when all that was happening in front of them? So that's why we need to actually shatter the myth that there is a trade-off.
And are you finding that there's interest from more and more leaders, business leaders, in that conversation?
Oh, absolutely. And that's why I think business leaders are more willing now to speak publicly about it, as we saw with Mark, the CEO of Salesforce. I mean, it's almost a little bit like coming out of the closet. Especially if you're a man, a successful, hard-charging CEO of a public company, talking about these things which are supposed to be feminine and soft and Shakti-like. But that's changing. That's now being innovative. And, of course, Steve Jobs had a big impact on that. The fact that he talked about the importance that Zen meditation had to his coming up with the most iconic Apple products. We had Bill Gates, who talked about his think weeks when he would go away, go to a cabin without any technology. Jeff Bezos talks about that. So, and we are collecting. We have an entire editorial team on the Huffington Post that every day collects new evidence that this is going mainstream. A list of CEOs, a list of business leaders, stories being written every day. We have, if anybody wants to be put on that list, every day we have an editor who goes through and picks every article being written on topics like that. And it's amazing how much is being written.
I think we have somebody over here.
Yeah, Arianna, Stuart Levine. I do my best to teach others how to consciously collaborate. And thank you for your message. It reminded me of a book a friend is working on called The Tao of Duh, because there's a way in which you're saying, duh, this all makes great sense. While you were speaking, when you mentioned the book that you didn't think anybody should read, I asked myself, I wonder what else she's written. And I went to Wikipedia. But one of the things that Wikipedia said, that you were a conservative commentator and at some point in time became a liberal commentator. Now, I was just wondering, what were the light bulbs that went off, assuming that statement in Wikipedia is true?
Yes, it is true. It's a very different conservative commentator than the idea that comes up to your mind right now. Like, I was a pro-choice, pro-gay rights, pro-gun control conservative commentator. So what made me conservative at the time was my belief that we could not delegate our compassion to government, that we needed to actually practice compassion ourselves and not just expect the government to take care of those in need. And I thought the private sector, individuals, non-profits should prioritize that. And what made me change in 1997 or 1996 was the recognition that, in fact, we needed the raw power of government appropriations, that there were too many social challenges and we could not depend on the private sector taking care of them. And that was really, so my shift was a very sort of specific shift around my changed understanding of the role of government. And also my sort of comfort in changing your mind. I think one of the great illusions we have is that somehow you can't change your mind. You know, you have to believe the same things from the moment you have conscious ideas to the moment you die, which is incredibly untrue and restrictive.
Yes, I agree. When I see the political commentary about flip-floppers, it's kind of like I scratch my head. You know, people came to a new understanding.
Right.
So
I mean,
thank you.
all the senators who flip-flopped on gay rights, good for them. You know, great, I think.
Thank you.
So maybe have time for, Jim, did you have we have maybe time for one more question and then.
One of the things that we talk about in conversations like this is how failure is a great way to get in contact with your wisdom. And you tell some wonderful stories in your life journey about failures with the books that nobody bought. And so I'm kind of wondering, in the work that you're doing now, in a very fast-paced media environment, how are you able to accommodate that or even institutionalize allowing people in that environment to fail where success of the business can't really be built on failure? So I'd be interested in hearing that connection between your own journey and learning, built on serial failures in a way, to this great success, and how you can put that into the culture of your organization.
Very important to bring that into the culture of the organization. And for us, it means that from the leadership level to the intern level, encouraging people to come up with ideas, to try things, to iterate. You know, to basically build an iterative culture where we can try things, and if they don't work, we'll try something else. And that's one of the great things about being online, as opposed to, say, writing a book, when you put it between hard covers and that's it forever. And teaching everybody and coming up with things that maybe haven't worked and talking about them in all hands meetings, in leadership team meetings, has been very important at HuffPost. Let me give you one example. You know, we launched a couple of years ago a Huffington Post magazine. Not in print, don't worry, we're not that stupid.
Just on that point, on the
Publisher of Mindful Magazine.
Mindful Magazine.
Bring it up.
By the way, you've agreed to be on the cover of the 7th issue.
That's a policeman, and every police chief in America is going to get a copy of the article about a policeman who's integrating mindfulness.
So let me me take back immediately what I said.
There's an example of institutionalizing, change right on the spot. So thank you.
No, but
Are we saying you can change your mind? So
I think print magazines with policemen doing meditation on the cover are a fantastic idea. Yeah. This was entirely rehearsed. Now, let me just say one more thing about that, which is that for me, print has some really painful association, because my father, if I can psychoanalyze myself, was a serial print publisher. He produced one paper after another, and each one of them went bankrupt. And that, for me, that's why I've always, when everybody said, can the Huffington Post be in print? It's like, no, never print. But in terms of your fundamental point about, thank you, about the example that I was giving you. So we launched this magazine. called Huffington Period. And the idea was that the Huffington Post was the hurly-burly, where you have like 1,600 stories a day, 70 sections, etc. And the magazine was the place where you took the best of the week, only what we produced, only our original reporting, the kind of stories that won us a Pulitzer, etc. And you can download it on a Saturday or a Friday, and it's like the difference between the one-night stand and the long weekend relationship far away from. And we thought people would pay for it. So we charged. Normally everything at the Huffington Post is free. That's part of our principle. And 2 weeks into it, I realized this was a mistake, that the Huffington Post readers are not used to paying for anything. And that's where we will never erect paywalls. I'm not saying that's not a good business strategy for others, but for us, it's not. So I said to my team, you know what, we're going to go back and return the money for the people who've paid their subscriptions and make it free. And they said, well, it's only 2 weeks. I said, yes, but it's not going to get any better. That's like when I believe in cutting your losses. If you make a mistake, the sooner you acknowledge it and course correct, the better it is. We could have, which completely changed our strategy. We moved into a sponsorship strategy. We got Toyota to sponsor the next month's issues, and it was much more successful in terms of financial returns as well. So that's the kind of thing that I believe is essential to cultivate as a culture.
What I was hoping you might give an example of as well is, how is it for some of your senior leaders or the people beneath them when they fail in their job? Are there ways that you institutionalize support for them, or a culture that allows that to happen in the midst of the fast pace and the business decisions you're making? I mean, I understand that we all start new businesses, fail, and we pull the plug. That's quick responsiveness. But I'm thinking more about the individual employees, the people you've got who are working so hard to make this happen, and you're encouraging their failure. And is there a way of institutionalizing that that's okay for them as well as?
Well, the first thing is, how do you reward people? Like, nobody is paid or gets bonuses on the Huffington Post based on traffic or based on all those obvious indicators of success, traffic, social, SEO, all the things that are monetizable. And the reason we do that, because we don't want anybody to be driven by that at the expense of quality, at the expense of living a life that's sustainable. I mean, I don't know what happened to Tom, but Tom will tell you that I constantly say, Tom, why are you sending me emails at midnight? Tom, why are you? And we're very, very conscious of building that culture in the office, to actually be noticing when people are overworking or when people are stressed. And therefore, we believe that if you reward people in terms of simple indicators like that, you add to the stress of their lives. And for example, I start my weekly leadership meeting with which incidentally allows no devices. None of us is on Blackberries, iPhones, or laptops. We're really present. It's only half an hour. We can do that. And we go around and we each talk about our tension points. What is your tension point? So that we can move on cruise control. And so that's the kind of culture. It's not written anywhere. It's just something that we hope is communicated and that we keep trying to get better at.
Thank you. Thank you. So I have a favor to ask, if you're willing. So on the schedule...
I'm taking this magazine incident.
Yeah, it's yours. Yeah. On the schedule, it says 3 to 3:45, Arianna Huffington, and then 3:45 to 4 is something called closing. Turns out I had no idea what to do for closing. So I just figured, something would happen, something would fill the space. So I'm wondering, do you have any good ideas for how to close this? This is the end of day 2. And if you don't, it's okay. I think I can wing it. But
I mean,
thought you
for
might be able to
me,
help.
I think it would be. I have been following this on Twitter and have been retweeting a lot. And what I would love is to hear from you. What are some of the insights that you'll take with you? I mean, you have been engaged in this space for so long, so I'd love to hear from you, and then maybe from anyone else here. What are sort of some of the insights that sometimes it can be a phrase, it can be a tool, something that you're going to take with you that will help you live a wiser life and spread it faster.
Great. Great question. So for me, I think the theme that came out most about was partly through two conversations, one with Mark Bertolini and the other with Andy Burt. I don't know if Andy's here from Google. And the interesting thing about Mark was that he's Detroit. He is working class Detroit. He drives a Harley Davidson and he does yoga. And how there is this way in which people don't have to fit the old models of what we think you should look like. So a CEO doesn't have to always have this certain stance and be tough and be rugged. Yoga people can drive Harleys. And when I was talking to Andy at Google today, he was also emphasizing the same thing. He said, one of the most valuable things I learned here today was I connected with people who it wasn't just about your job and your identity. And I realized, like, you can be kind of on the wisdom path, but you don't need to. I think it was Thoreau who said, I always like a religion that doesn't require the changing of new clothes. And that you could actually be your own expression. So if you're really hyper, you can just be hyper and very loving at the same time. And you can be calm and very loving. And you can, there's this way in which your personality and your different elements can be brought in. And so for me, that was one of the biggest themes that came out, was it's not so much about following any particular how something should look, but it's much more about your own unique expression. I think when people hear you and they hear Mark, they get your spirit and they feel inspired because you're yourself as on your own path. So I think for me, that's been the biggest theme or the biggest takeaway for the event. I don't know if I'll start dressing differently now, but we'll see, maybe.
Maybe wearing a tie.
Oh, no. I've never worn a tie in my life, so unlikely, but we'll see. So maybe we'll have time, following Arianna's suggestion, just for a few people to share some reflections.
I just don't want to.
You have to speak loud, yeah.
I don't want to climb over everybody to get to the.
I have a mic here.
Oh, thank you. I'm so grateful to have been here. I mean, Soren, your beautiful, gentle energy. You've given everybody in this room an amazing gift the last couple days. I'm sure everyone feels that. And then after today, I've found there are a bunch of women here who are very interested in the wisdom women in business to do something here in New York. And so I wanted to say that out loud while everyone's still here. And I don't know what's the best way to do it, but I think it would be really cool to do. You guys are having one in San Francisco, but to fly to San Francisco for a one-nighter, I think there's probably hundreds of women who are practitioners, meditators, trying to bring that practice to their business.
Great. Thank you.
And I'm also hoping that maybe Arianna and Agape would join us too. So if maybe you guys can help us figure out a way to coordinate all the women who want to do that.
So info
so
at wisdom2conference.com. We'll take that in, but info at wisdom2conference.com comes to all of us to process ideas. So thank you. Anybody else? And then...
Hi, my name is Gigi, and my biggest takeaway from this event is to recognize that it's a movement. Like, it's so dear to me personally. I used to think that it was separate, that I was either off in an ashram or engaged in big business. And for me, when Merrill Lynch crashed, that was when I got to go and move to Europe, because I was in the real estate market here in New York. And it was an opportunity to really look at, what do I care about and what do I value? And walking from the break, coming back here today, it's not even like gratitude. It's a momentum and an empowerment. Like to hear you today and to know that you've got your teams of all these great people looking to get this word out there, because this is the future, you know. And so the biggest takeaway is that it's like a restored faith and an acknowledgement in us as a culture again. Mm-hmm. And for that I say thank you. And just to say that extends, I was looking at Arianna, but that extends. I'm so grateful for you and your work. Thank you.
And if I can add something to this, you know, it's everywhere. It's not just Google and Silicon Valley and New York. I was in Columbus, Ohio last night, and I spoke to 1,000 women. Is that where you're from? There was this incredible feeling in the room. Exactly the feeling that you shared, that we are part of a movement. And so it's important to recognize that it's everywhere, and kind of connecting all the people from the most unlikely places.
Yeah. So I have this vision of us just standing for a moment and just holding hands. It's a little new agey, but we haven't done too much. So we can all, you're welcome to stand on the stage too if you want.
Yes, come up to the stage. Thank you. That was beautiful what you said. It's so true.
So there's always these connections that we have digitally, but it just seemed good to actually connect physically too. So is everybody connected? So I'm just going to invite us to close our eyes for a second, and then see if you can feel and send your energy through each of your hands, knowing that whatever you send to the left and whatever you send to the right is going to go circle around to every other participant here. And that each one of these people are on your team, so to speak. Have the same cares, same aspirations, same fears. And that none of us are ever alone. There's always something that connects us. And thank you. And I would love to just invite all of us as we step out onto the New York street here soon after to explore what it's like to live from this space as much as we can. Mm-hmm. And as Arianna said, to find those, whatever that time is and whatever those practices are that help you regenerate. And it doesn't matter what that is, but that we each have our own way of finding that and doing that. Anything else?
Thank you. I love you, Soren.
Thank you.